Welcome back to our C Programming Challenge series. Today, we'll solve the HackerRank problem, sum and difference of two numbers. Along the way, I'll show you how to handle integers and floats in C and how to use scanf and printf properly to work with input and output. So, to the problem breakdown. The problem is simple. We need to read two integers and two floating point numbers, then print their sum and difference. The first line of input gives us two integers and the second line gives us two floats. And our job is to perform the arithmetic and format the output correctly. So what we are supposed to do basically is create a program which receives two integers and two floating point numbers, which in other words you can say decimal numbers, right? 2.3, 4.7, those are floating point numbers. Okay, so we are supposed to create a program which receives this input from a user, that's someone who is interacting with our program, and then we are supposed to print out the sum of the integers and the difference of the integers, as well as the sum of the floating point numbers and the difference of the floating point numbers. That is what we are supposed to do. That's the challenge. Okay, now if you watched my previous video, which was the first challenge, you would remember that I talked about format strings in printf. Okay, now in printf, format strings are used to determine the type of data you want to print out. So you see in the previous video we used %s. Now when it comes to different data types that we want to print out, we use different symbols. For example, if you want to print an integer, you use %d. If you want to print a float, you use %f. Now let's break down certain key concepts that you need to understand. The first and major concept you need to understand, which is like the most important in this challenge, is data types. The fact that we have data types, which as the name implies is talking about types of data. So you can have different types of data within a program, and when you are declaring variables, when you are creating variables which are containers that hold values, you are supposed to specify the type of data that they will hold. So if the variables you are creating will hold integers, then you have to specify that this variable is an integer variable, and you use that with the keyword int. So when you type int in your keyboard on this platform, you realize that it's highlighted blue. That's because it's a keyword. It's a special word that has been reserved to define the type of data that you're working with. If it is a floating point number, you use floats. Okay, so that is it for data types. Now that we understand data types, let's get right into the code, because we've already treated the basics of input and output, which is using printf and scanf. So let's start right away. First of all, we are going to create two variables to store our integers. Okay, so we can call variable 1 integer 1. Okay, and we can call the second variable integer 2, right? And then we are going to also create our floats. So to create our float variables, we use the keyword floats, and then we create a variable called float1, and we create a variable called float2. Make sure you never create a variable and name it after a keyword. You are going to get an error if you do that. That's the reason why I added 1 and 2 to my variable names. Now, after creating your variable, what is next? What is next is to read the values from the user. And how do we do that exactly? We use scanf. So we are going to type scanf, and we are going to read the two integers first, then we'll read the two floats. So now to read integers using scanf, we are going to use the %d format specifier. Okay, and then when you are using scanf, after you specify this, that you want to read two integers, this is the first integer you want to read, and this is the second integer you want to read, After you specify this, the next thing after the comma is the location where you want to store these values. So you are basically saying when the user enters this value, I want to store it at this address. So how do you do that? We want to store our integer variables in int1 and int2. Okay, good. So this is it, but we can't just do this. It will give us an error. So we have to bring the ampersand symbol in front of the name of the variables. Someone might ask why we need to do this. It's simply because the ampersand symbol in C program is known as the address of operator. And what scanf needs is the address of these variables. So the address tells it where the variables are located so that it can place the values inside that variable. Okay, so now we are going to repeat the same thing for the floats. So we are going to have %f for floats, another %f, and then we're going to have the address of float 1. Okay, and then we are going to have the address of float 2. Now that we've read them, what do we need to do? We need to print out the arithmetic. Okay, now the arithmetic is saying we should print the sum and difference. So we're going to print the sum and difference of the integers first. And how do we do that? We use printf. So in using printf, we bring the format specifier again. And then now, in this case, what we want to print is the sum. So we just do int1 plus int2. Okay, and then we also want to print, so int1 plus int2, right, gives us an integer, and that is the first thing that will be printed. Then the next thing that will be printed is int1 minus int2. Okay, and then that completes it. Okay, and then we repeat the same thing for floats. Now, let's not forget our new line character because we want everything to be on a new line. Now for floats, we use %f. Okay, and these variables will change. Perfect. Now, one thing that we must take note of is the fact that the question asks us to make sure our float variables are rounded to 1 decimal place. So to do that, all we need to do is append the % symbol in %f with .1, and we are done. This is the simple code. So let's run it. And we get it. We passed the test case. Now let's submit and see if it passes all other test cases. And it does. So I hope you understand. If there are any questions, leave them in the comment section down below. So in this challenge, what did we learn? We learned how to declare and use integers and floats, how to use scanf to read multiple values in one line, and how to format output in C with printf. This is one of the building blocks of programming in C, and it sets the stage for working with bigger problems where precise input-output handling is crucial. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to subscribe and follow this playlist, C Programming Challenges from Zero to Pro. In the next video, we'll solve another HackerRank challenge and push your skills a step further.